Good morning. Yesterday, a very disturbing and troubling incident occurred at the Franklin campus where a man approached a student outside of the main entrance and fired several shots. This action is completely unacceptable, and this team is committed to doing everything we can to ensure the safety and security of our students and staff. We are very fortunate that no one was hurt and that our students remained safe throughout the day. Rochester Police Department determined that this incident was targeted to one individual. I spent yesterday with our team, board commissioners, the mayor, the police chief, to devise a strategy to address how the violence in our community is affecting our schools. I have to say, I am extremely disappointed that during an active investigation, an image was shared by media that could potentially put other students in danger, and would hope that others would take this into consideration before doing those actions in the future. We are actively collaborating with the Rochester Police Department to increase police presence across some of our campuses and are continuously reviewing data to evaluate the deployment of resources. Beginning this morning, Rochester Police were present and will continue to be at 5 schools during arrival and dismissal. These schools were selected based on community challenges and data collected by our internal team. This collaboration allows for greater opportunities for our safety and security team to support other schools during arrival and dismissal. I have to thank the City of Rochester, the Rochester Police Department, our Board of Education, our safety and security team, the school team at Franklin for their quick response in supporting and ensuring we have safe campuses throughout this district. At this time, I would open up the questions for President Elliot and I.
You mentioned 5 schools. Can you name those 5 schools?
So we're continuously evaluating the data to see where those school supports would be, and then also identifying where our internal resources could best support our schools.
Okay, because I understand that there are at least 5 schools within the city school district that are identifiably and state-identified hotspots for gun violence. I'm wondering if that stays up.
So that's one of the part of our decision-making points when we're deciding where we're going to place that police presence. But some of those things change, ongoing, and so those we'll make some adjustments based on that as well.
Is this permanent?
So we are, the board, the Rochester Police Department, the mayor and I have talked for the remainder of the year putting something in place. Yep.
Carmine, where will those 5 schools be tonight for dismissal tonight?
So tonight we will be at Franklin, Wilson, Edison, Northeast, and Franklin, Wilson, Edison, Northeast. Those, I said Franklin, Edison, Northeast, sorry, Wilson, and what's the other one I'm missing, sorry. East, I got East, yep, East, if I didn't say East, yep.
Carmine, you talked about meeting with the mayor, the police, to come up with a strategy. What is the strategy to deal with a problem that seems difficult to solve?
So right now we have a response to what has happened yesterday. I think the long-term strategy is working with our community and the city to collaborate. And we've made a commitment to kind of come together and have these discussions about what it is, right? This isn't, having support at arrival and dismissal is not going to alleviate what we're seeing in our community. This is going to take a whole system approach to improving our city and improving the violence that we're seeing in our city.
So let me take it from a different perspective, because I work in the community. My 50 years or so has been in this community working with the families that we're talking about. One of the things that happened about 20 years ago is that funding was taken away from youth programs and placed into early childhood education, right? The city thought that if we focused in on early childhood education, that we would resolve a lot of these problems. So the money was moved, right? At Baden Street, where I worked for 20 years, a lot of the youth programs that we had there, they did not get funding. The after-school program for youth, we weren't able to do. We were able to do it for those 5 from birth to 12, but not for youth. And as a result of that, data shows that the idle time is from 3 to 6 p.m. Well, we were providing those programs. Well, that funding got cut. And so as a result of that funding got cut, when you didn't have those kinds of programs that provided, the soft skills in terms of how you work on a job, those skills that help with tutoring, when you had those student staff relationships where, our students were able to talk with the adult about issues that were going on in their household. When those kinds of programs were cut, this is what we see now. So this is a result of a lack of funding. And I've talked to everybody who would listen. I will share this information with our congressmen, with our state representatives. We've got to get back to funding these youth programs that are going to, and they've got to be done within the inner city. These other organizations can't do this work because they don't understand our children the way in which those who are at Community Place or Baden Street, those organizations, SWAN, understand our children to be able to have the kind of impact that we need to have so we can reduce the kind of violence that we're seeing in our community. That's what it's going to take.
And I have a question too for the superintendent. Going back to yesterday, a media release was sent out and it said the individual approached the school. It's really a two-part question. In the photo you mentioned in your opening statement, this was far beyond approaching. These were 3 kids huddled in front of the school door. 1, why are we seeing a lack of transparency? And 2, what resources are we giving those students that are traumatized by the gun violence they experienced yesterday?
So I'm going to say that we have an active police investigation on what had happened on that campus, right? And the police are investigating all of that. And that's where the statement came from the police. That is happening from that lens. For the students, we have connected with those students, right? We've given them social work support. We've had them connect with their counselor. Our principal has contacted their parents. So we're wrapping our arms around the students there as well. But from an active investigation point, I would ask the RPD that question.
Let me just also add to that. Trauma is something that has gone on in this community for a very long time. Unfortunately, families, students are somewhat used to this kind of trauma. Now, does it make it right? No, it does not. But our families have learned how to live with the trauma in spite of and to continue their lives. And so what we had was students that went on to class. Now, do they need to have someone to talk to? Absolutely. But at the same time, this is something that occurs in this community all the time. You can't stop living. You have to continue to live, and that includes you have to go to school. You have to, go to work. You have to go to the grocery store. You have to do it. I mean, not only our families, some of us on the board have been affected by things that have happened into the community. And you have to learn to live with it and to continue to try to make a productive life.
In 2020, the city budget was changed and stopped funding school resource officers. Are you looking at getting school resource officers back in schools now?
Well, I'll tell you, that's not something that the board is interested in. I'll tell you why. Because what has happened in the past, we've had some of our schools that have used police officers as counselors. We don't want that to happen. So if there has been some kind of altercation, they send them to the police as opposed to try to do it from a preventive way and have counselors to be involved in that. We've seen some footage, and at that time when Officer Pearson was killed and we brought in Chief Simonelli, because at that time we saw a police officer pick up a female student, and slam her to the ground. That was when I was chair of the Community and Intergovernmental Relations that we brought him in to talk about that. That's an issue. That's problematic. And the reason that they did is because she would not give up her cell phone. She had just lost her grandmother, and that was the safest place for her to be. Schools are supposed to be a beacon of hope and a safe place to come. And so that's something that the board has not been willing to do. We're okay because we understand we have to protect our children and we have to protect our staff. But at the same time, we don't want the kind of altercation that we experience, that our families experience in the community to occur in our schools.
There was a student who was not at Franklin, but at a nearby campus, whose parent came into her home yesterday. This sort of incident doesn't just affect the people who were immediately in danger of losing their lives in that moment. This affects students who are, I mean, as you mentioned, like trauma is kind of part of their everyday life. children, people can't learn when they're in a state of fear. I know that Ruth Turner was appointed earlier this week. I mean, what's going to happen in terms of taking care of the whole well-being of students so that they can actually learn and achieve?
Yeah, we're excited about Dr. Turner, Ruth Turner returning, right? Because she brings that lens and that restorative approach and that social justice and the social emotional well-being work that she started when she was here originally. That being said, that's why we have police presence there, right? This was a targeted individual, but I want our families and community and our students to know that when they get off the bus, that what is happening in our community and what is happening around that area they'll have someone there to help support them in the event that there's an emergency, right? There's unfortunately no guarantees in every situation, right? But I have now, the board, the city have all agreed that for our arrival and dismissal, when kids arrive to school on time and they come when they're there, there'll be support there for them to enter the building, right? We want to make sure, once we get in our buildings, right, we have other safety teams, we have other SSOs that do remarkable work to make sure our buildings are safe. Right now, we want to make sure that that community influence and that community violence that we're seeing does not impact our kids coming into the building. So our families should feel, a little bit appreciative to this response, and the quickness of this response is to make sure that they know their kids are going to be entering the building safely.
Is there a scaffolding approach to any of this?
In terms of?
Well, you mentioned, taking care of dismissal and arrival, having police presence at certain schools. But, is there any sort of step-by-step approach? Because as Cynthia Elliot mentioned, this has been affecting the city for generations.
Right, absolutely. We have trauma. We've increased our social emotional supports in our schools dramatically over the course of the years, right? When we removed school resource officers, we added counselors in every building, right? Even elementary buildings. We've added supports for social emotional. All right, this isn't something that you could treat with an assembly. This isn't something that you could treat quickly, right? This is long-standing work that we're going to have to invest in the community about mental health and mental wellness for our kids.
And I would just also add that we're not going to be perfect in this. We see some of the best families. There was just a story where, a husband, father, drove the car over the cliff, right? Looks like a seemingly, great family, nice family. What is that? Why would that happen? And so we will do the best that we can, given the constraints and the resources that we have, but it's not going to be perfect. We're not going to catch it all. We're just, you have to, and the community has to recognize that we will do the best that we can do to protect our children and that our families feel that they can be assured that we're going to take care of them the best that we can do. But to say that an issue may not happen, will not happen in the past, we can't guarantee that, as the superintendent's just said.
President Elliot, not to bombard this, but the budget season's coming up, right? What's the move? What's going to happen with the school board? Is there a plan to prioritize?
We do have some priorities, and I'll let the superintendent talk about that. But what we do have some priorities in terms of what we want to do. We're very excited, and let me just say, from last year when the board decided to increase the food budget for our students, and so there have been a lot of accolades from students and families about us increasing our budget line for food service, and we're looking at, we're going to have to look at increasing more funding around, safety and security. That's something that we're going to have to consider. But, we want to focus in on making sure that as much of the funding can be in the classrooms that will be able to support, our teachers and to support our students in a way in which there is credible learning, because I believe that if we have the kind of credible learning that we need, and that be the focus, that we're going to reduce a lot of the kind of negative behavior that we see in the classrooms and in the community.
Cynthia, are you hopeful about the future?
I am. I was disappointed that you all didn't cover our board organizational meeting the other night. If you go back and look at that, first of all, there was a 7-0 vote for both the president and the vice president.
Let me rephrase my question.
Okay.
I'm not interested in organizational things. I'm interested in boots on the ground, kids in school, and parents who are scared.
All right, so let me finish.
Okay.
Yeah, let me finish. So the reason I bring that up, because if your leadership is working together, then your central office is going to be working together. Your schools are going to be working together, because they take their direction from what the leadership is doing. And so if the leadership is focusing in on children and not on personal things, you're going to see that translate down into the classrooms. And many of us are in the classrooms, and we're talking about that work has got to be with the children and on the children. So yes, I'm very hopeful, based on what I saw at the organizational meeting on January 3rd, that we're going to get into those classrooms with Dr. Peluso and with his team, and we're going to get this work done. Now, it's going to be a heavy lift, but the first thing that we had to do was to make sure we had the pieces in order so that we can do the heavy lift. And I believe that many of us on the board and in this district are built for this work. I grew up in this work. I grew up with these people. I know what it takes. And that's why I'm still here, and we can get it done. So I'm very hopeful.
Can you talk about your relationship with the mayor? I know you've mentioned before that a lot of the violence is, the city, the outside community, and schools are just affected and a part of yesterday. Can you kind of talk about that, your relationship with the city?
Well, the mayor was a previous school board member. But he grew up in this community. He knows this community. His father was a great activist in this community. I'm in touch with the mayor regularly, as is the superintendent. He knows the issues that are going on in this community. He is as committed to our students and our families as we are. And whatever we need, and it is evident with the superintendent reaching out to the mayor and asking for support, and he has provided that support.
I do want to say that the mayor is equally outraged, equally as concerned, right? And we know that resources and capacity are an issue in terms of, police department everywhere, right? We're struggling with finding resources. He is prioritized as supporting our schools before and after right now with his resources to make sure this happens. He's equally as outraged. He reached out to us and invited some of our team members to his team meeting yesterday to address some of those things. So we are in constant communication. I will say that if there was prior a severed relationship between the city and the district, that is not with this administration or the administration in the city.
And I do have a question for either. Parents yesterday that I spoke to said they weren't notified, and it's something I've heard time and time again covering incidents in Rochester City School District. For them to understand better, what is the process of notifying them of these incidents, just so they can be clear about that? I know safety is number one, obviously.
Yeah, information during that time comes in fast and furious, right? And you don't have all of the information at all of the time. And what information do you go out with? Sometimes it becomes frustrating when you don't go out with a whole lot of information, right? You tell families that you're in a lockout, and then they don't know why, right? Do you wait for those pieces? This is about us, and we already are having some tabletop discussions around how do we do this better? How do we continuously improve our systems, right? So when we go into a lockout, right, we're gonna put an immediate notification out that we're in a lockout, right? You may not get further details as families. Please don't come to the school. And then we will provide details as it comes. But I don't want families to be frustrated that they don't have the details, because we're usually in the midst of gathering all that. Information comes at such a speed at it, and we're putting pieces together that that takes a little bit of time. What we can tell you is that we're going into a lockout, right? Don't come to the school, right, while we get it, and we will provide you details as soon as we can. That's going to be the important messaging. In our communication department, our safety and security team, we've already spent last night talking about what are steps to do to continuously improve our processes.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. President Elliot, I just wanted to clarify something. WX excited to cover that meeting. So there was
Which-
media coverage. WX excited.
Yeah, which meeting?
The
organization
said no
meeting.
one covered.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Did you see, so you saw?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Not at all afraid.
Yeah, thank you.
What happened, Cynthia?
Well, the board is usually, there's usually this, this conflict,
Yeah.
and, we were able to work it out where we are working on ourselves individually, working on the people, board members who have issues or have extended themselves to work on their issues together, and then we're working together as a group in a trip. So we're moving in the right direction. I
Do
feel
you think it's gonna stick?
I do.
Yeah?
I do. I really do. And I'm hopeful for, as long as we, doesn't mean that we're not going to have diversity of opinions on the issues, right? I think that's healthy, and we need to have that, because I can learn from my colleagues. But the other stuff, I think that's enough.
Sounds like trying to model the restorative justice that.
Yeah.